Hello, welcome to Andy Tales. After watching the video, make sure there's no one else in the room. Don't forget to write your city and the time in the comments.
Story 1: The Bag. Some nights feel heavier than others. The air clings to your skin, and the streetlights flicker like they're trying to warn you of something. It was one of those nights in Jersey City, the kind where the fog rolls in low, hugging the pavement like a restless ghost. Even the rats seemed to scurry quieter than usual. Darren Moore adjusted his rearview mirror for the 5th time that hour, more out of habit than necessity. His back ached from being behind the wheel for too long, and the lukewarm coffee in the cup holder had gone bitter hours ago. Uber driving wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. And on nights like this, when the world seemed half asleep, he almost enjoyed the solitude. Almost. His app had been quiet for over 40 minutes. No pings, no tips, just silence and static from the old FM radio he refused to replace. Then buzz. Not a regular Uber ping, not even a text. It was a phone call, an unknown number, local area code. Darren hesitated. He rarely picked up unknown calls, especially not in the middle of the night. But something in him, boredom, maybe desperation, told him to answer. He tapped the green circle. Yeah. The voice on the other end was smooth. Too smooth, like someone trying very hard to sound casual. Hey, you're Darren, right? A friend of mine, Lewis, said you're the guy who doesn't ask too many questions. That true? Darren blinked, instantly on guard. Lewis was a regular, always paid in cash. Liked to ride without the app. Said it gave him privacy. Darren didn't pry. As long as the money was good and the vibe wasn't sketchy, he didn't care. But hearing his name mentioned by a stranger at nearly 2 in the morning was unsettling. Who's this? Darren asked. Just a friend. I need a lift. Not far. And I'll pay double. Cash. All you gotta do is swing by Lewis's usual spot. You know it? Darren leaned back in his seat and stared out the windshield. The fog had thickened. Streetlights looked like halos now, drowning in mist. You said double? Double. Maybe more. I just need a ride and a bit of help with some baggage. There was a pause, a little too long. Something about the way he said baggage sent a chill crawling up Darren's spine. But it was late, and rent was due. He tried to silence the part of his brain that was already drafting headlines in the back of his skull. You bringing a suitcase? He asked, voice flat. You could call it that. Another pause. Silence pressed against Darren's chest like a weighted blanket. But still, his mouth moved before his brain could stop it. I'm on my way. He ended the call and tossed the phone onto the passenger seat. For a moment, he just sat there, gripping the steering wheel, staring at the faint outline of his face in the rearview mirror. He knew this wasn't smart. He knew that in every horror story, every warning, every cautionary tale, this was the moment where things began to go wrong. And still, he shifted into drive. The streets near the riverfront always felt different after midnight, like the city forgot them. The asphalt cracked more here. The streetlights either buzzed like dying flies or stayed dark altogether. Warehouses loomed like sleeping beasts, their windows broken or boarded, their walls tattooed with the graffiti of ghosts. Darren pulled up to the spot Lewis used to favor, an abandoned loading dock beside an old meatpacking plant. The place had been condemned for years, but people like Lewis didn't care about zoning laws. It was quiet, out of the way, and more importantly, off the grid. His headlights cut through the fog like blades, illuminating a hunched figure waiting near the edge of the dock. The man wore a long coat that looked too big for him, the collar turned up, face hidden beneath a hood. Next to him sat a duffel bag. Not just any bag, a huge one, long, heavy-looking, the kind that didn't carry clothes, the kind cops might unzip with gloved hands and grim expressions. Darren's foot hovered above the brake pedal as his instinct screamed to leave. Too late, the figure raised a hand and gave a lazy wave, confident, like he knew Darren would stop. And Darren did. The man approached the passenger side, but didn't open the door. Instead, he leaned down, face still hidden in the shadows. "You got trunk space?" Darren cleared his throat. "Yeah, pop it." He hesitated, then pressed the button on the console. The trunk clicked open. The man moved to the back of the car, and Darren turned in his seat, watching through the rearview mirror. The bag scraped as it was dragged, thumping once against the bumper as it was hoisted in. The man didn't struggle, he was stronger than he looked. He slid into the passenger seat without a word and shut the door with eerie gentleness. Now Darren could see him more clearly. Mid-30s, maybe, pale skin. A faint scar ran down his jawline, almost elegant in its symmetry. His eyes were unreadable calm, cold, but not empty, calculating. Darren tried not to look directly at him as he asked the only question he was brave enough to utter. "So, where to?" The man smiled, small, tight, without warmth. "Out of town, 40 minutes north. I'll give you directions." "Cash." The man reached into his coat and pulled out a wad of bills. Crisp, tightly folded, and way more than double. "Half now. Half when we get there." Darren took it. His fingers brushed the man's gloves. Thin leather, like surgeon's gloves but darker, shinier. They left no prints. He stuffed the money into the glove compartment and nodded. The man leaned back and stared ahead. "Let's not waste time, Darren." The way he said his name made Darren's skin crawl, as if the man wasn't confirming it but reminding him. He pulled away from the dock, the fog swallowing them whole. The GPS sat silent. The radio was off, and the only sound in the car was the low hum of tires on wet asphalt, and the soft, slow thud of something shifting in the trunk. Something that wasn't just baggage. The highway bled out of the city like a dying vein. Sparse lights on the roadside flickered past like memories Darren didn't want to revisit. The deeper they drove into the countryside, the more the world felt like it was falling away behind them, swallowed by trees, mist, and silence. Darren kept both hands on the wheel, knuckles white, eyes flicking to the rearview mirror every few minutes. Not to check the road behind them, but to listen for another thud, a shuffle, a moan. But the thing in the trunk had gone still. The man beside him hadn't spoken since they left the city limits. He just sat there, unmoving, staring ahead, like he wasn't riding but waiting, like he'd already been here before and was just letting the script play out. Darren finally broke the silence. "So what's out this way?" He tried to keep his tone casual, neutral, not nervous, not terrified. The man tilted his head slightly, not turning to face him. "An old house. Haven't been there in years." "Yours?" A pause. Then softly, "Not anymore." They passed a road sign, white paint chipped and barely legible. Vesper Hollow, 12 miles. Darren felt his stomach tighten. The name scratched at something in the back of his mind. Something he'd read once, maybe, in a newspaper, a missing person case. "Vesper Hollow?" he asked. The man didn't answer, just smiled that same empty smile, his fingers tapping rhythmically on his knee. 4 beats, then stop. 4 beats, then stop, like a lullaby for corpses. Darren turned his focus to the road, but the fog was thickening. It rolled across the tarmac in low, serpentine coils, swallowing road lines and reflector posts. The headlights barely reached past the hood. He slowed to a crawl, tension building in his spine like a bowstring drawn too tight. Suddenly, the man said, "Pull over." Darren blinked. "Here?" Yes. They were in the middle of nowhere. Trees pressed in on either side like walls of bone. No signs, no turnoffs, just forest and mist and silence. But Darren obeyed. He eased the car onto the gravel shoulder and killed the engine. For a moment, there was only the sound of cooling metal ticking in the night. The man turned to him. "I need you to help me with the bag." Darren hesitated. His fingers hovered over the key. The woods felt alive, not with animals, but with watchers, eyes that didn't blink, shadows that didn't belong. He forced a nod. "Sure." They stepped out. The fog clung to their legs like water. Darren opened the trunk. The bag was still there, still zipped, still unmoving. But now that he was close, he could smell it. Not rot, not blood, something worse, like burned hair and old meat soaked in chemicals, like something that didn't want to stay dead. The man reached in, grabbing one end of the bag. Other side. Darren obeyed, lifting. The weight was uneven, too dense in the middle. The shape inside was vaguely human, but the proportions were off. Twisted, bent wrong. They carried it off the road and into the trees. Each step deeper made the darkness thicker. Then the man stopped. "Here." He let the bag drop. The sound it made when it hit the ground wasn't a thud. It was a squelch. Darren stepped back. "Is this where?" But the man raised a hand. He crouched beside the bag, unzipping it slowly, deliberately. Darren turned away, unable to look. He heard the zipper reach the end. Then silence. Then a wet breath. Not the man's. Something else. The breath didn't belong in this world. It rasped from the open duffel like air forced through torn lungs. A hollow, sticky wheeze that seemed to pull the mist toward it, feeding on moisture, on heat, on sound itself. Darren froze. He didn't want to look. Every instinct in his body told him, "Don't turn around." But something deeper, some primal urge for understanding, or perhaps a morbid hope that knowing might save him, made him glance over his shoulder. And he saw it. Not clearly, not yet, just movement. Something inside the bag twitching, squirming. A joint bending the wrong way. A pale foot, or maybe a hand, dragging itself an inch closer to the forest floor. Then a voice, or something trying to remember how to use one. "WH, where is she?" Not the man's voice, not Darren's, not even human, really. The man stood over the bag, unmoved. "You'll see her soon." Darren stepped back. "What the hell is that?" The man didn't answer right away. He just stared down at the thing in the bag like it was an old friend waking from a long, painful sleep. "She asked me to bring it back," he said. "She was very specific. I couldn't let it stay buried." "She?" The man looked at Darren then, and for the first time there was emotion in his eyes. Not anger, not fear, reverence. "My sister." That word hit Darren like a blow. He remembered now. The name, the headline, Vesper Hollow Man claims ghost of sister demands offerings. Dismissed as rural madness. Small town myth. No evidence ever found. Darren's voice came out a whisper. "She's dead." The man smiled. "Only mostly." From the bag, something unfurled. A slick, glistening arm, too long, too thin, with too many joints. It groped the dirt like a newborn calf, blind and ravenous. The fingers clawed into the soil, dragging the rest of the form with it. Darren staggered back. "What is this? What the hell is this?" "She was the first," the man said calmly, "but not the last." The thing rose, slowly, shapeless at first like fog given form, then more defined, a face or what might have once been one. Pressed forward from beneath translucent flesh, lips split in a silent scream. It didn't walk, crawled, slid, its limbs bending around the trees like they recognized them. Darren turned to run, but the forest wasn't the same. The trees had shifted, closed in. The road was gone. Behind him, the man called out, "Where are you going? We're not finished." And then the thing spoke again, this time clearly, this time in her voice. "Darren!" He stopped. He hadn't told them his name. He turned. The creature's face had changed. Not fully, just enough. It looked like someone he knew, someone he'd forgotten. A girl, pale, eyes wide, lips trembling. Hazel. No, it wasn't possible. He whispered, "You're not her." The creature smiled. "You were supposed to save me." And then it screamed. The scream didn't echo. It spread. Through the trees. Through the air. Through Darren's bones. It wasn't just a sound. It was a memory. A flood. A voice beneath voices. A cry that came from a night long buried in the back of his mind. He was 12 again. A girl was missing, and he was hiding. They'd found her diary pages near the quarry. Some said she drowned. Some said she ran. But Darren remembered the last thing she ever said to him. "Promise me you won't let them hurt me." And he had promised. And then he had watched from the trees, from behind the schoolyard fence, from the safe, silent dark, and said nothing. Back in the forest, the creature moved closer. It wore her now, not perfectly, just enough to make the guilt come alive again. In her eyes, in her mouth, in the half-rotted curve of her cheek. The man stood behind her, smiling like a priest at the altar. "She remembers you," he said. "She asked for you by name. You were the only one who saw, the only one who could have stopped them." "I was a kid," Darren whispered. "You were a coward." The trees whispered it too. "Coward, coward, coward." Darren fell to his knees, his breath ragged. The creature tilted its head and reached out a hand, long fingers curling around the air between them. "You can still make it right," said the man. "How?" Darren breathed. The man knelt beside him, took his hand like an old friend. "Stay with her. That's all she ever wanted. Someone who wouldn't leave. Someone who would listen." The forest seemed to lean in, waiting for his answer. Darren looked into her face, or what was left of it. He thought of the silence he'd kept for 20 years. The names he never said. The cries he never reported. The guilt he buried deeper than any body. Maybe this was the price. He stood, walked toward her. She opened her arms. And in that moment, just for a heartbeat, she looked like the girl he had known, the one who had trusted him, the one he had failed. He stepped into her embrace, and the forest sighed. 1 week later, they found the truck parked by the ranger station. Empty, keys still in the ignition, the logbook open to an unfinished sentence. Stopped for a second, heard something in the woods. Thought I saw. No blood, no body. Just a trail of footprints that stopped at the edge of the trees. And a bag, unzipped, empty. Story 2: the portrait that learned to breathe. Have you ever looked into a pair of painted eyes and felt them stare back? That's what happened to me the night I uncovered the Rhodes family portrait. The one no one dared touch for generations. It wasn't just a painting. It was something alive, something hungry, something that knew my name. There is a painting in my family that no one dares to touch. It hangs in the hallway of our ancestral estate, covered in a sheet of thick black velvet. My grandmother always said it was cursed. My mother never spoke of it at all. But I, Eleanor Rhodes, 23 years old and recently orphaned, was the last in the bloodline to inherit this crumbling house and the secrets buried within its walls. They told me never to uncover it. They told me it watches. They told me it remembers. The Rhodes estate was a relic swallowed by time, nestled on the outskirts of a forgotten village, The sprawling manor stood like a monument to decay and secrets. Its once majestic stone walls, now cracked and mottled with ivy, seemed to breathe a slow, heavy sigh each time the wind swept through the gnarled branches of the ancient oaks that guarded the grounds. I arrived late in the afternoon, the sky bruised with the heavy clouds of an impending storm. The gravel driveway crunched under the tires of my old car as I pulled up, my heart pounding in rhythm with the distant roll of thunder. The house loomed before me, windows dark and watching, as if aware of my arrival. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the faint scent of forgotten memories. Old wood, faded fabric, and the faint, sweet trace of something floral and decayed, like wilted roses pressed between the pages of a long-forgotten diary. Every step echoed through the cavernous halls, disturbed only by the occasional creak of settling wood or the soft flutter of a trapped moth. The first night alone in the Rhodes house was a test of courage I wasn't sure I possessed. Shadows pooled in corners, stretching impossibly long and shifting with a life of their own. The faintest whisper of sound, a distant tap or a sigh, pulled at the edges of my nerves, teasing me with the feeling that I was not truly alone. Then, in the center of the grand hallway, veiled beneath that ominous sheet of black velvet, hung the portrait. The family painting, so long hidden, so long feared. The edges of the fabric were frayed, as if clawed at by something desperate to break free. Despite every warning whispered in my bloodline, despite the tales of madness and despair that clung to this painting like shadows to a flame, I found myself unable to resist. With trembling hands, I reached up and pulled the velvet away. The air seemed to thicken as the heavy cloth fell to the floor, revealing a woman's face. A pale, porcelain visage frozen in a haunting expression that balanced on the edge of sorrow and fury. Her eyes, painted with such unnerving realism, seemed to flicker with a light that was not of this world. For a moment I could swear she blinked, and then the house groaned. The night stretched out like a living thing, thick and suffocating. After unveiling the portrait, I felt an invisible weight pressing down on me, as though the woman's eyes had somehow anchored a shadow to my very soul. I tried to steady my breathing, but every sound in the house seemed amplified. The ticking of the antique clock downstairs, the distant drip of water somewhere deep within the walls, and worst of all, a faint, almost imperceptible whisper that seemed to creep just beyond the edge of hearing. I told myself it was my imagination. Old houses had their quirks. Settling floors, stray drafts, the rustle of wildlife in the underbrush. But as the minutes passed, the whisper grew louder, evolving from mere breath to something more articulate, more insistent. I froze, straining to catch the words. At first, they were just fragments, soft, desperate syllables that brushed past me like a cold breeze. "Help me, please." The voice was female, fragile and broken. I glanced back at the portrait. The woman's eyes seemed to darken, her painted lips parting ever so slightly, as if she too was trying to speak through the veil of paint and canvas. A chill crawled up my spine. I realized then that the house was not simply old. It was alive with stories, with anguish that refused to die. I wanted to flee, to slam the front door and never look back. But some invisible thread held me rooted, curious, and terrified in equal measure. Suddenly, a sharp knock echoed from the library door down the hall. I jolted, my heart hammering in my chest. The knock came again, 3 quick raps, deliberate and measured. Swallowing my fear, I moved cautiously towards the door, each step muffled by the thick, threadbare carpet. I reached out, hand trembling, and pushed it open. The room was empty, but on the desk lay a small, leather-bound book I had never seen before. Its cover was worn, cracked, and embossed with strange symbols that seemed to shimmer faintly in the dim candlelight. I picked it up, feeling a sudden surge of cold. The whispers returned, now urgent, like a plea for salvation. Opening the book, I found the pages filled with delicate handwriting, letters looping and curling like spiderwebs. The words were a diary, the secret confessions of the woman in the portrait. Her name was Evelyn Rhodes, and her story was a tapestry of love, betrayal, and a curse that had trapped her soul within the house for over a century. I sank into a creaking leather chair, the storm finally breaking outside, rain hammering against the windows like frantic fingers trying to claw their way in. As I began to read, the shadows in the room seemed to lean closer, eager to share their tale. The rain outside intensified, drumming relentlessly on the roof like the heartbeat of some ancient beast. Inside the dimly lit library, I clutched the diary tightly, its worn leather cover cool against my palms. The scent of old paper and something faintly metallic filled the air, a mix of decay and secrets long buried. I cleared my throat, then began to read aloud softly, as if the words themselves might break the silence or awaken the ghosts around me. March 12th, 1894. The nights grow colder, and with them, the shadows in this house lengthen. Father says it is the chill of approaching winter, but I know better. There is something else here, something that watches me from the corners of every room, whispering my name in voices not my own. I feel it in my bones. The house itself is alive, and it remembers every sorrow it has ever witnessed. My eyes scanned the fragile script, each letter flowing like a lament. Evelyn wrote with a desperation that clung to every word, revealing a life trapped in fear and loneliness. I was promised to Jonathan, the man my father chose for me, but my heart belongs to another, William. He is kind, gentle, and the only light in this dark place. Yet, my father's wrath is a tempest I dare not cross. Last night, I overheard whispers from the servants. Jonathan is not a man of honor but of darkness, a collector of souls masked by a smile. A shiver traced my spine. The diary was no longer just a story. It was a confession, a warning. I turned the page with trembling fingers. They say the portrait in the hall contains my likeness, but it is more than mere paint and canvas. It is a prison, a cage for my spirit. Jonathan's curse is woven into its very fibers, binding me until my torment is avenged. I fear that my voice will be silenced forever, my pleas lost in the shadows. As I read these words aloud, the room grew colder still. I could almost feel Evelyn's presence beside me, her despair, her yearning for freedom. A sudden gust of wind blew out the candle, plunging me into darkness. My breath hitched, heart racing. Then, in the silence that followed, the whispers returned, clearer, more urgent. Find him, free me. I fumbled for matches, the flames sputtering to life, casting dancing shadows on the walls. The diary slipped from my grasp, landing open on the floor. A folded piece of parchment fell out. I picked it up and unfolded it carefully. It was a letter, penned in the same delicate hand. To whoever finds this, beware the man behind the mask. Jonathan Rhodes is no mere suitor but a vessel of malice. If you value your soul, do not trust his promises. Seek the truth in the hidden chamber beneath the house. There lies the key to breaking my curse. My pulse quickened. Hidden chamber? A key? The mystery deepened, twisting around me like the creeping ivy outside the cracked windows. I rose, determined to uncover the secrets Evelyn had died trying to reveal. The house seemed to sigh, the walls groaning as if in anticipation. The night was far from over. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, eerie shadows across the worn wooden floor of her small apartment, Emily felt the weight of the diary pressing heavily on her chest. The words she had read, Jonathan's desperate pleas, his descent into madness, were not mere tales. They were warnings, whispers from the past clawing their way into her present. That evening, a storm began to brew outside. Rain lashed against the windows like frantic fingers, and thunder rumbled low, mirroring the unease knotting inside her. She sat at the flickering candlelight, determined to uncover more. The diary hinted at an object Jonathan had found, something that had altered everything, a talisman or relic, imbued with a darkness that no one dared to name. Her phone buzzed sharply, jolting her from her thoughts. It was a message from an unknown number. "Stop digging before it's too late." Emily's heart pounded, but she refused to be intimidated. If anything, the threat only fueled her resolve. She decided to visit the local library, a place Jonathan had mentioned as a repository of forgotten knowledge. Among dusty shelves and crumbling tomes, Emily sought answers. Hours slipped by as she pored over old newspapers, town records, and obscure folklore. Patterns emerged: disappearances, strange sightings, and whispered legends about a cursed artifact buried deep beneath the town. Just as she was about to leave, a shadow flickered across the far corner of the library. Emily's breath caught in her throat. No one else was supposed to be there. She turned slowly, eyes searching the dim light, but found only emptiness, or so it seemed. Outside, the storm intensified. Lightning illuminated the ancient trees lining the streets, their branches clawing at the sky like skeletal hands. Emily knew she was on the edge of something far bigger than she had ever imagined. A darkness older than time itself, waiting patiently to be unleashed again. Emily's thoughts swirled as she left the library, the storm's fury now a relentless roar around her. The warning message echoed in her mind, but curiosity clawed at her stronger than fear. She clutched the diary tightly, as if it were both a shield and a key. Returning home, she examined the diary again, this time focusing on a cryptic map Jonathan had sketched in its margins. The faded lines traced a path beneath the town, leading to a place marked only by an ominous symbol, an ancient rune she couldn't decipher. But instinct told her this was where the truth waited. Under the cover of darkness, Emily grabbed a flashlight, her jacket, and the diary, then headed toward the town's oldest landmark, the abandoned chapel on the hill. The place had been closed for decades, whispered about in fearful tones by locals. Stories said it was cursed, a gateway to something unspeakable. The chapel's iron gate protested with a shriek as she pushed it open. Inside, the air was thick with dust and decay, the scent of forgotten prayers lingering faintly. Her flashlight beam danced over broken pews and shattered stained glass, fragments of color glimmering in the gloom. At the altar, Emily found a loose stone in the floor. Kneeling, she pried it open to reveal a narrow staircase spiraling down into darkness. Her pulse quickened. There was no turning back now. Step by cautious step, she descended into the cold earth, the walls closing in around her. The diary's rune glowed faintly in her mind, guiding her deeper. Below, the air grew damp and heavy, and the silence was absolute except for the steady drip of water echoing from somewhere beyond. At the bottom, she entered a chamber carved from stone, its walls etched with the same ancient symbols. In the center rested a small wooden box, aged and worn but sealed with iron clasps. Emily reached out, fingers trembling, and lifted the lid. Inside lay an object unlike anything she had imagined. A delicate porcelain doll, its face eerily lifelike, eyes seeming to shimmer with a strange inner light. As her fingers brushed the doll's cracked surface, a cold shiver raced down her spine. The air seemed to shift, and a whisper, barely audible, filled the chamber. "You should not have come." The past and present collided in that moment, and Emily realized the true horror was only just beginning. The whisper lingered in the silence, curling around Emily's senses like a chilling breeze that seemed to seep from the very walls. She swallowed hard, heart pounding like a frantic drumbeat. The porcelain doll sat heavy in her hands, its glassy eyes reflecting the faint glow from her flashlight. Yet somehow it felt alive, as if it were watching her, waiting. Carefully, she lifted the doll from the box, noting the intricate craftsmanship, the delicate curls of its hair, the tiny embroidered dress, the fragile hands folded perfectly in its lap. But something was off. The doll's face bore an uncanny resemblance to her own, a mirror image frozen in time. Her breath hitched. Questions flooded her mind. Why was this doll here, hidden beneath the chapel? Why did it look like her? And what did that whisper mean? Suddenly, a soft thud echoed behind her. Spinning around, Emily's light caught a shadow slipping into the corner of the chamber. Her body tensed, every muscle ready to flee or fight. "Who's there?" she called, voice trembling but firm. No answer came, only the slow drip of water and the steady pounding of her own heartbeat. Then, from the shadows, a figure emerged. A man older, with haunted eyes and a face etched by years of regret. "My name is Thomas," he said quietly, stepping closer. "I've been waiting for someone like you." Emily's grip tightened on the doll. "Waiting? For me? Why?" Thomas's gaze darkened. "Because the curse that binds that doll, it's tied to your family, to your bloodline, and it's far older and more dangerous than you can imagine." He stepped back, revealing the walls covered in more runes and faded paintings depicting a tragic tale. A mother who had tried to protect her child from a malevolent spirit by trapping its essence in a doll. But the spirit, enraged and twisted, had turned the curse back upon the family, trapping their souls in a nightmare cycle. Emily's mind reeled. This was no ordinary doll. It was a prison, a vessel of pain and terror. And now it was awakening. "Can it be stopped?" she asked, voice barely a whisper. Thomas nodded grimly. "But it will require sacrifice, and confronting the darkest secrets buried in your family's past." As the storm raged outside, the two stood together in the cold chamber, united by a fragile hope and the terrifying knowledge that the real battle was just beginning. The air grew heavier as Maya stepped deeper into the dimly lit attic, her heart pounding like a war drum in her chest. Shadows danced on the peeling wallpaper, and every creak of the old house echoed like a whispered secret. The doll lay on the dusty floor, its glassy eyes seeming to follow her every move, cold and unblinking. She reached out, trembling, to pick it up, but before her fingers could touch the porcelain skin, a sudden chill swept through the room, and the attic door slammed shut behind her with a deafening bang. Panic surged through Maya's veins as she whirled around, her breath catching in her throat. In the dim light, the doll's painted lips seemed to curve into a sinister smile. A faint, eerie whisper echoed, soft as a breeze yet sharp as a razor. "You shouldn't have come back." Maya's mind raced. She remembered the stories her grandmother had told her as a child, tales of spirits trapped in objects, seeking to escape by any means necessary. The doll wasn't just a toy, it was a prison, and now it was awake. Frantically, Maya searched for the attic window, the only possible escape. But the glass was fogged, and beyond it, thick branches scratched against the panes like skeletal fingers. Suddenly, the doll moved. It crawled across the floor with unnatural grace, its limbs bending in impossible angles. Maya stumbled backward, her eyes wide with terror. The doll's voice, a haunting, childlike tone, sang a lullaby twisted and warped, the melody curling into her mind like a poisonous vine. Desperate, Maya grabbed an old wooden chair and held it out like a shield. The doll stopped, tilting its head as if amused. "You can't run from me," it whispered. Not now. Not ever. Maya's chest tightened. She knew this was no longer about the doll. It was about her soul, her past, and the dark secret buried beneath the house's foundations. Summoning every ounce of courage, she slammed the chair down on the doll. The porcelain shattered into countless pieces, scattering across the attic floor like broken promises. For a moment, silence. Then, a guttural scream ripped through the air, shaking the rafters. The broken pieces writhed, glowing with a malevolent light before dissolving into shadows that seeped into the cracks of the floor. The attic door creaked open slowly. Maya, breathless and trembling, stepped out into the hallway, free, but forever changed. She realized some things are better left buried, and some dolls are never truly broken. Maya stumbled down the narrow staircase, each step groaning under her weight like a tired old beast. Her hands still shook from the encounter, and her mind swirled with a mix of relief and dread. The house around her felt different now, heavier, darker, as if the shadows themselves were watching her every move. She reached the main floor and paused in the hallway, listening. Silence. No creaks, no whispers, no distant laughter. Just the steady rhythm of her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, a sharp reminder that the outside world still existed. Hands trembling, she pulled it out and saw a single missed call. Her mother. Maya hesitated, then called back. "Mom," she whispered, voice barely audible. I'm okay." On the other end, her mother's voice trembled with relief. "Thank God. We've been worried sick. You should never have gone back there." Maya swallowed hard. I had to know." Her mother sighed deeply. "Some secrets are cursed, Maya. You can't change what happened, but maybe you can find a way to stop it from happening to anyone else." Maya nodded, even though her mother couldn't see her. "I will." She ended the call and looked around the dusty old house one last time. The memories, the darkness, the curse, they were all part of her now. But she was ready to face whatever came next. Because some battles are just the beginning. Story 3: The Whispering Shadows of Black Hollow. They say the forest remembers. It whispers your secrets back to you in the dead of night, if you dare to listen. The wind howled through the twisted branches of the old forest, carrying with it whispers that seemed almost human, desperate, pleading, and full of sorrow. The moon was a pale, cold eye in the sky, barely lighting the narrow dirt road that wound between ancient trees like a forgotten scar. Evelyn had been driving for hours, her knuckles white on the steering wheel, eyes heavy but restless. She wasn't sure how she ended up here, in this forgotten corner of the world, but the letter she had received that afternoon had left her no choice. "Come home," it had said. No signature, no return address. Just those two words scrawled in shaky handwriting. Home, a place Evelyn hadn't thought about in years. The little town of Black Hollow had always been shrouded in rumors. Stories of disappearances, strange lights, and voices heard in the dead of night. But for Evelyn, it was where her past had been buried, where memories she had tried to forget lay beneath the surface like old scars. She pulled her car to a stop near the edge of the forest and stepped out into the chill night air. The silence was thick, almost suffocating. The only sound was the distant drip of water somewhere in the shadows. Her breath formed small clouds in the cold as she walked toward the old family house, a crumbling relic hidden by overgrown vines and the weight of time. The door creaked open with a push, revealing darkness inside. A faint, musty smell filled her nostrils, the scent of dust, decay, and forgotten things. Evelyn's heart hammered in her chest as she stepped inside, the floorboards groaning beneath her feet. The house seemed alive, watching her, waiting, On the old wooden table in the center of the room lay a single object, a worn, leather-bound journal. She picked it up, fingers trembling, and opened to the first page. The handwriting was hers, but from long ago, a younger version of herself, desperate to unravel the secrets buried deep in Black Hollow. They are watching, waiting. I don't know if I'm brave enough to face what's coming. Evelyn swallowed hard and looked up into the shadowed corners of the room. She wasn't alone. The house groaned as if exhaling a long-held breath, the walls seeming to close in around Evelyn. The faint glow of the moon filtered through the grimy windows, casting pale rectangles onto the worn wooden floor. She flipped the journal closed and hugged it tightly to her chest. Her footsteps echoed as she moved deeper inside, the air thick with the scent of mildew and forgotten memories. Her eyes struggled to adjust to the dimness. Old portraits, their colors faded and faces blurred by time, lined the walls. A silent gallery of ancestors who had long since slipped beyond the veil of reality. It felt as if their gazes followed her, judging, warning, or perhaps pleading. Evelyn's mind raced with questions. Who had sent the letter? Why now? And most unsettling of all, what exactly was she supposed to face here? She reached the staircase leading upstairs. The steps creaked ominously beneath her weight. A chill ran down her spine. From somewhere deep in the house, a faint tapping sound began, irregular, distant, like fingers drumming on wood. She froze, heart pounding, straining to locate its source. Suddenly, the sound stopped. Silence returned, heavier than before. Evelyn swallowed hard and continued upstairs, each step dragging her deeper into a past she had tried to escape. At the end of the hallway stood her old bedroom, untouched and frozen in time. She pushed the door open, revealing the same faded wallpaper, a cracked mirror hanging crookedly on the wall, and her childhood bed draped with a dusty quilt. On the bedside table lay an old photograph, yellowed and brittle, of a girl with bright eyes and a smile too innocent for the darkness surrounding Black Hollow. Evelyn's own eyes stared back at her from the frame, a painful reminder of a self she barely recognized. Then she noticed it. A shadow flickered behind the glass. She spun around, heart in her throat, but saw nothing, only the empty hallway stretching into darkness. A whisper floated through the room, barely audible, like a secret carried on the wind. "You can't hide anymore." Evelyn's breath caught. The voice was faint, but unmistakably real. Her hands trembled as she clutched the journal once more, flipping it open to the middle pages. Scrawled there was a chilling entry. "The forest is alive. It remembers, takes what is owed, and it's coming for me." Suddenly, the temperature dropped sharply. Frost formed on the window pane, and the shadows seemed to thicken, pooling like ink across the floor. The house was no longer just a house. It was a gateway, and Evelyn was standing at the threshold. The whisper echoed again, this time louder, more insistent. "You can't hide anymore." Evelyn's skin prickled with cold, every nerve alive with tension. She slammed the journal shut, the sound loud in the eerie silence of the room. Her eyes darted to the window. Outside, the moon was swallowed by thick clouds, plunging the room into near darkness. A sudden gust rattled the window pane, making the frost crack like fragile glass. With trembling hands, Evelyn grabbed her coat from the chair and moved toward the door, her mind wrestling between the urge to flee and the pull to uncover the truth. The house felt alive, watching her, waiting. Every shadow seemed to shift just beyond the edge of her vision. She stepped into the hallway, the wooden floor groaning beneath her feet. The tapping sound returned, closer now, steady and deliberate. It led her down the corridor and into the parlor, a room she barely remembered, filled with antique furniture draped in white sheets like ghosts frozen in time. In the center of the room stood an old rocking chair, moving gently back and forth as if pushed by an unseen hand. Evelyn's breath hitched. The tapping sound had stopped, replaced by a soft creaking, the slow rocking of the chair. She moved toward it, heart hammering in her chest, and saw something resting on the seat. A small wooden box, intricately carved with symbols she didn't recognize but somehow felt deeply unsettling. Her fingers hesitated before reaching for it. The moment she touched the box, a sudden chill swept through the room. The walls seemed to close in, the air thick with a whispering chorus of voices just beyond comprehension. With effort, Evelyn opened the box. Inside lay a bundle of old letters tied with a faded red ribbon, brittle and worn, but unmistakably familiar handwriting. She untied the ribbon and unfolded the top letter. The ink was smudged, the words written in a hurried, desperate scrawl. If you're reading this, then the darkness has found its way back. Do not trust the house, do not trust the shadows. They are alive. They feed on fear. You must leave before it's too late. The room grew colder still, and Evelyn felt a breath on the back of her neck, a whisper she couldn't quite make out. Her heart screamed at her to run, but her feet refused to move. The house had already claimed her. Evelyn stood frozen, the letter trembling in her hands as the temperature in the room dropped sharply. Her breath formed little clouds in the cold air. Shadows along the walls began to flicker and warp, twisting into shapes that resembled faces. Silent, twisted, watching her. The whispered voices rose, overlapping into a chilling chorus of warnings and pleas. She could almost understand them, fragments of sentences breaking through the cacophony. Leave, before it's too late. Trapped forever. The darkness feeds. Panic threatened to overwhelm her, but Evelyn forced herself to take a steadying breath. She scanned the room, eyes settling on the only exit, the heavy wooden door at the far end of the parlor. But as she moved toward it, the door slammed shut with a violent bang, echoing through the house like a gunshot. Her heart pounded. She rattled the doorknob, locked tight. "No," she whispered, terror rooting her to the spot. Then, from somewhere deep in the house, came a low, guttural growl that sent shivers racing down her spine. The floorboards creaked beneath invisible footsteps, approaching fast. Desperation surged. She darted to the nearest window, pounding on the frosted glass, but it wouldn't budge. The outside world was just beyond reach, distant and indifferent. She was trapped. Suddenly, the wooden box slipped from her hands, crashing to the floor and spilling its contents. More letters, photographs, and an old silver locket. She picked up the locket, feeling its cold weight in her palm. Inside was a faded portrait of a young woman, eyes dark and sorrowful, staring straight into Evelyn's soul. A memory flashed unbidden. A warning from her grandmother, long ago, about a cursed house that claimed the souls of those who dared to stay. The growling grew louder, closer. Evelyn backed away, her breath ragged. The shadows around her began to coalesce into a towering figure. Tall, cloaked in darkness, its face hidden in shadow but its intent clear. It reached out a skeletal hand toward her. "Run!" The whispers urged one last time. But Evelyn knew she could not escape the house. Not yet. She would have to face whatever darkness lived within its walls, or be consumed by it forever. Evelyn's mind raced, searching for any fragment of knowledge or strength to fight back against the encroaching darkness. The cold figure loomed over her, its presence suffocating, like a void ready to swallow her whole. But something inside her stirred, a spark of defiance ignited by the memories of those who had come before her. Gripping the silver locket tightly, she felt a sudden warmth emanate from it, pulsing like a heartbeat in her palm. The air shifted, The growling softened, replaced by an eerie silence that pressed in on her ears. The shadowy figure hesitated, recoiling slightly as if burned by an unseen flame. Taking advantage of the moment, Evelyn bolted toward the staircase that led up to the attic, the place where the house's secrets seemed to gather most densely. She knew she had to find the source of the curse, the root of this darkness, if she wanted any hope of escape. As she climbed, the walls whispered more urgently, voices overlapping in a chaotic symphony of anguish and warning. The locket, the key, the truth must be faced. In the attic, dust motes floated like tiny stars in the pale moonlight filtering through cracked windows. Boxes were stacked haphazardly, old furniture draped in white sheets like specters frozen in time. Evelyn's eyes caught sight of a large, ornate mirror leaning against the far wall. Its glass was cracked, but faint images flickered within. Scenes from the past, moments she hadn't lived but somehow remembered. A woman, dressed in a flowing black gown, stood by a fireplace, her eyes burning with sorrow and rage. The whispers crescendoed into a single, chilling voice. "I am Lillian, betrayed, forgotten, bound to this place. Free me." Evelyn's breath hitched. The woman in the mirror was the same as in the locket. A sudden clarity struck her. The curse was not just darkness, but a trapped soul seeking release. She clutched the locket, resolve hardening in her chest. To free Lillian and herself, she would have to confront the pain, the betrayal, and the unfinished story that chained this spirit to the house. The shadow figure from downstairs now pressed against the attic door, scratching and snarling, desperate to keep her from the truth. Evelyn squared her shoulders and stepped toward the mirror. The reflection rippled, and the voice whispered one final command. "Tell my story. Set me free." Evelyn's heart pounded like a drum as she reached out toward the cracked mirror. The surface rippled beneath her fingers, cool and strangely alive, like water trapped in glass. The woman's face, Lillian's face, watched her with desperate eyes that seemed to plead for salvation. Taking a deep breath, Evelyn whispered, "Tell me your story. I want to help." The attic dimmed further, shadows thickening around her, but the mirror glowed faintly, illuminating the room with a ghostly light. Slowly, images began to appear within its fractured glass, scenes playing out like an ancient film. Lillian, a young woman of undeniable beauty and grace, was shown walking through grand hallways of a once majestic mansion. Her smile was warm but fleeting. Behind it lay the burden of secrets she could barely bear. She was betrothed to a powerful man, one who promised her love but delivered only cruelty. One night, jealousy and rage had driven him to a terrible act. Lillian was accused of betrayal she never committed, cast out and condemned to die alone. But her spirit refused to leave, bound by injustice, anger, and a deep yearning for truth. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. The pain echoed in her own soul, a mirror of betrayal and loneliness. The mirror flickered, and Lillian's voice resonated softly. "Only when my story is known will the curse be broken. Speak my name. Remember me." With trembling lips, Evelyn spoke aloud. "Lillian, I will tell your story." Suddenly, the shadow at the door let out a low, furious growl. The attic seemed to quake, the walls shaking as if resisting the breaking of a long-held secret. But Evelyn stood firm, clutching the locket as the light from the mirror grew brighter, flooding the room with warmth. The house itself seemed to breathe, exhaling centuries of pain and sorrow. As the first hints of dawn touched the horizon, the shadow dissolved into a wisp of smoke, the curse lifting like a heavy veil. Evelyn collapsed onto the floor, exhausted but victorious. She had not only freed a trapped soul but begun to heal the wounds that haunted the house, and perhaps herself. The first golden rays of sunlight seeped cautiously through the attic window, casting long, fragile beams that danced on the dust-laden floorboards. Evelyn lay still for a moment, her breath slow and steady, as if recovering from a long battle fought within the walls of that ancient room. The oppressive heaviness that had clung to her like a second skin seemed to lift, replaced by a fragile sense of peace. Rising slowly, she glanced at the cracked mirror, now dim and silent, its surface reflecting only her tired but resolute face. The locket hung heavy against her chest, a tangible connection to the ghostly presence she had freed. It was more than a trinket. It was a symbol of a story untold, a history reclaimed. She knew the house would never be the same. The echoes of sorrow had been replaced by the faint murmur of closure, yet beneath the calm lay an unsettling awareness. The darkness that once ruled here was not completely vanquished. It had been contained, but the roots of the curse, deep and tangled, hinted at unfinished business. Determined to uncover the full truth, Evelyn descended the creaking attic stairs, her footsteps tentative but driven. The mansion's sprawling corridors stretched before her, bathed in the soft morning light but still whispering secrets in the shifting shadows. In the library, ancient books beckoned with their cracked spines and yellowed pages. Evelyn pulled one down at random, a dusty journal belonging to Lillian. Its brittle pages were filled with elegant script, chronicling the young woman's life in exquisite detail. Hopes, dreams, betrayals, and the slow, suffocating descent into despair. As Evelyn read, the portrait of Lillian became clearer. Not just a ghost or a tragic victim, but a woman of fierce spirit, unjustly silenced. The journal revealed names, dates, and hidden connections within the mansion's history, a web of lies woven by those who feared the truth. The house groaned softly, as if acknowledging her commitment to unearthing its past. Evelyn understood that telling Lillian's story was only the beginning. To truly lift the shadow from this place, she would have to confront the darkness buried beneath generations of silence, and face whatever still lingered, waiting to be revealed. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the promise of revelations and the weight of forgotten sorrows. Evelyn clenched the locket tightly. The journey had only just begun. The day outside moved with deceptive calm, the sun climbing higher as if eager to wash away the shadows that clung to the mansion's history. But inside, Evelyn felt the weight of secrets pressing in, like thick fog refusing to lift. The journal she held was more than a record. It was a map, leading deeper into the tangled web of the past. She settled at the heavy oak table in the library, the dim light flickering from a nearby candle. The leather-bound journal felt fragile in her hands, yet its words pulsed with a life that transcended time. Page after page, she uncovered details of Lillian's life, the jealous rival who envied her beauty, the forbidden love that blossomed and then withered, the dark family secrets whispered behind closed doors. Each revelation was a puzzle piece, fitting together a picture of a tragedy far more complex than she had imagined. Evelyn's heart ached with empathy for the girl who had been trapped by circumstances and cruelty, her voice silenced by the very walls meant to protect her. As the afternoon shadows lengthened, Evelyn's eyes caught a folded letter tucked between the pages. Carefully, she unfolded the brittle paper. The handwriting was hurried, desperate, a plea for help from Lillian to someone trusted, dated the night before her disappearance. The letter spoke of a hidden room, a place where Lillian believed she could hide from the dangers stalking her. A room concealed within the mansion's very foundations, long forgotten and sealed away by those who wished to bury the truth. Evelyn's pulse quickened. This was it, the key to the mystery, the place where the answers must lie. The hidden room could hold the final pieces that would unravel the curse and free the restless spirit once and for all. Determined, she rose and made her way to the study, where the mansion's blueprints were rumored to be stored. Dust motes danced in the air as she pulled open a cracked wooden chest and sifted through yellowed papers until she found what she sought. The blueprints were faded but legible, revealing a maze of corridors, secret passages, and a small, unmarked chamber beneath the basement floor. Evelyn's breath hitched. The room was real. A chill crawled up her spine, but her resolve hardened. With a final glance around the silent library, she tucked the journal and letter into her bag and headed down the creaky staircase toward the basement. Each step echoed ominously in the stale air, the darkness thickening as she neared the hidden door described in the letter. Her fingers traced the cold stone wall until they found a loose brick, the secret latch. With a soft click, the passage opened, revealing a narrow stairway spiraling down into the unknown. The air was heavy with forgotten sorrow and anticipation. Evelyn lit a lantern and began her descent. Below, the shadows waited, and so did the truth. The narrow stairway groaned under Evelyn's careful footsteps as she descended deeper into the bowels of the mansion. The faint flicker of her lantern cast dancing shadows on the damp stone walls, each breath she took swirling in the cold, musty air. The silence around her was thick, not just the absence of sound, but a presence that seemed to watch and wait. At the bottom of the stairs, the passage opened into a small chamber, cloaked in darkness and silence. The room was empty save for a solitary object resting in the center, an ornate wooden box, aged and covered in strange carvings that twisted like thorny vines. The air around it felt charged, as if the box itself held a secret too heavy to be spoken aloud. Evelyn's hands trembled as she approached. She set the lantern down and reached out, brushing dust from the box's lid. The carvings were intricate, depicting scenes of sorrow and longing. A woman reaching out, shadows curling around her like chains. The craftsmanship was exquisite, but there was an unsettling aura, a subtle warning woven into the wood grain. With a deep breath, Evelyn lifted the lid. Inside lay a collection of delicate porcelain fragments, pieces of what once had been a doll. But this was no ordinary toy. The shards bore faint traces of paint resembling a face, frozen in a haunting expression of anguish. Alongside the fragments lay a faded photograph of Lillian, dressed in her finest gown, smiling wistfully. A chill ran down Evelyn's spine as realization dawned. This doll had belonged to Lillian, or perhaps was more than a doll, a vessel for the girl's trapped spirit. Suddenly, a soft whisper brushed against her ear, a voice both fragile and pleading. The room grew colder, shadows lengthening and coalescing into a faint, shimmering figure, the ghostly outline of Lillian herself. "Thank you," the apparition murmured, eyes glistening with unshed tears. "You found what I hid, but the curse remains. The box holds the key, but to break the chains, you must face the truth buried in the past." Evelyn's heart pounded. This was more than a ghost story, it was a desperate plea for justice, for release. She carefully gathered the fragments and the photograph, wrapping them gently in cloth. The spirit lingered a moment longer, her form flickering like candlelight in the breeze, before fading into the darkness. Evelyn rose, resolve hardening within her. The hidden room had revealed its secret, but the journey was far from over. To break the curse and free Lillian, she would need to uncover the full story, a tale of betrayal, love, and a sin long buried. Steeling herself, Evelyn began her ascent back to the surface, the weight of the past heavy in her mind but her purpose clearer than ever. The mansion's shadows still whispered, but now she was listening and ready to fight.